Broadway, Broadway beats, Broadway, Broadway beats, Broadway beats, Broadway beats, Broadway. Listen to the Broadway beats. Broadway makes you wanna move your feet. Everybody's tapping into everything that's happening on Broadway beats, Broadway beats, Broadway beats, Broadway beats.
This week's Broadway Beat is made possible by a generous contribution from Jerome Records.
Hello, I'm Richard Ridge. Welcome to Broadway Beat's first show of the 2000-2001 season, and a very special show it is. We have as our guest the great star of stage and screen, Miss Debbie Reynolds. Appearing in more than 35 motion pictures, 2 Broadway musicals, many road shows, and dozens of television appearances, she's become one of the most sought-after nightclub and concert performers. This year, Miss Reynolds celebrates her 52nd year in show business. After making her screen debut with June Haver in Warner Brothers' The Daughter of Rosie O'Grady, she went on to become one of MGM's and Hollywood's biggest stars. Her list of co-stars reads like a who's who of Hollywood. The Pleasure of His Company with Fred Astaire, The Tender Trap with Frank Sinatra, Three Little Words with Red Skelton and Fred Astaire, 2 Weeks with Love with Jane Powell, Ricardo Montalban, and Carlton Carpenter, Tammy and the Bachelor with Leslie Nielsen, How the West Was Won with Gregory Peck and Thelma Ritter, The Singing Nun with dear friend Agnes Moorehead, The Mating Game with Tony Randall, What's the Matter with Helen with Shelley Winters, and Singing in the Rain opposite Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor, which went on to become one of the greatest movie musicals of all time. Miss Reynolds received an Academy Award nomination for her tour de force performance as the Unsinkable Molly Brown. In 1973, Debbie, as she prefers to be called, made her Broadway debut in the musical revival of Irene, breaking all box office records. She returned to Broadway in 1983 to star in the musical Woman of the Year. Most recently, she's received acclaim for her performances on TV's Will and Grace and in the films In and Out with Kevin Kline and Mother with Albert Brooks. And she's about to co-star opposite Shirley MacLaine, Elizabeth Taylor, and Joan Collins in daughter Carrie Fisher's new film, These Old Broads. This past summer, while in the middle of a 25-city concert tour, we caught up with Debbie at her sold-out performance at New Jersey's famed Paper Mill Playhouse. It is our pleasure to welcome to Broadway Beat the irrepressible, unsinkable Debbie Reynolds.
The night is warm, soft and warm. I long for his charms. I'd sing like a violin if I was in his arms. Wish I knew if he knew what I am dreaming of. Tell me, tell me, tell me, is he in love?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for sitting with us after your show at the Paper Mill Playhouse.
You're welcome. It's a beautiful theater, and we had a good show, and everybody was so nice. The area is so beautiful here.
Did you know, were you surprised at the time, the success of the song Tammy?
Well, I thought it was very pretty and very sweet, you know, when I did it, and Hank Mancini arranged it. Jay Livingston wrote it. Not that I knew that these guys were the greatest musicians ever, because I was really very young and not show businessy. You know, I was raised just really normal, and no one in my family was in show business. So I really didn't, I wasn't very trained, you know, until many years later when I was at MGM 17 years. So of course then I studied everything like a madwoman, you know, ballet, tap, jazz, everything. All I did was do classes for 7-8 hours a day forever and ever, and I still study. So I don't think you can ever stop learning. But that all pitched me forward, because following that they put me into Singing in the Rain. And I don't think Gene Kelly really wanted me to do it, because I couldn't really dance great at all, you know. I mean, he said, do a maxi Ford, and I said, is that a car? I mean, it's a great step, you know, it's a tap step. And I didn't even know that. I knew time step and the waltz clog and nothing particular. Well, I had to work like a maniac, but he was very patient and very difficult, you know. I mean, he's a master. Gene Kelly was a master, so you had to get really up there. So I had to study very, very hard. Donald was closer to my age, you know, because I think Gene was about only 37 and Donald was 27 or 6, you know, and I was 17. So it was really a rough picture, Singing in the Rain, but a great classic.
Because that film was like a trial by fire for you, wasn't it?
It was probably the most difficult, no, not the most difficult thing in my life. My marriages have been the most difficult, and birth. So, but I would say...
career-wise.
Career-wise, I think that was the most physical, other than Molly Brown, which was many years later, but very, very hard. The dance numbers were really difficult, and we had a short schedule put on us because of Zhivago. Dr. Zhivago was shooting in who knows where, Russia somewhere, and they ran short of money, so they decided to cut our budget, the Unsinkable Molly Brown, and put the money more into Dr. Zhivago, which was a great film, and I loved it. But as far as Debbie Reynolds, the actress, we were all really upset because we only had I had 2 days to learn the number called He's My Friend, which is a really tough jig, Irish jig, tap, just a very hard number. And that was like impossible to learn. I mean, I never went to bed. I just stayed in the rehearsal hall and just cried, really, and prayed that I could get through that number, because they shot it with 2 cameras, and we did it in 1 take. And I said, just have buckets of ice at the end of it. We all just passed out on the floor at the end of it, because it was like a full 7-8 minute number without a break. So, but we only shot it once.
So I was going to ask you about that. That's the number you do with Grover Dale and Gus Draconis.
Gus Draconis and Grover Dale, and that's when Gus was just a young man, not married. Then he married Goldie Hawn, and then Grover came on to New York to be a Broadway choreographer and star. So many things have gone under the water, but they had 16 weeks to learn it. But I was in scenes, so I couldn't learn it. I was in Colorado shooting. I was really busy doing acting, and then I didn't have the time that they had to learn the dance numbers. But it turned out great. So.
But you campaigned very hard for that role of Molly Brown, didn't you?
Yes, Shirley MacLaine was set for that role, and then she was under contract to Hal Wallace, and he was in a lawsuit of some kind. He and Shirley, she with him and he with her. I don't know what it was all about. And so MGM didn't want to get into that, and happily enough, so I went to speak to the producer, who was Larry Weingarten, and he said, well, it looks like you're going to get it, Debbie. And then Chuck Walters, the director who directed me in another film, didn't want me for the part, and so I had to really campaign him. He came to my house, in fact it was raining, and he said he didn't want me to do it, and he said, we're just going to wait for Shirley. And I said, I know that I am perfect for this part, even more than Shirley. For this part, for The Apartment, Some Came Running, all these other wonderful films that Shirley's gotten to do. She's been wonderful in all of them, but for this Unsinkable Molly Brown, I just really felt that I was Molly Brown. So I didn't care who else was up for the part. I thought that if I had a chance, I wanted very much to do that. And so Chuck said to me, Mr. Walters said to me, well, you're really too short for the part. So I said, well, how short is the part?
Well, that was a big success for you both critically and professionally, because you received an Academy Award nomination for that film.
Yes, I should have received the Oscar for
Yes,
that.
You should have, hands down.
Yeah, I really felt that, well, I'm proud of the performance, and I'm proud that I was nominated, but there's nothing like the little gold statue.
What was life like at MGM for you? Because I spoke to Ann Miller and Jane Powell, and they said that was really the place to be during the golden age of Hollywood, MGM.
What it was just like a movie itself, because when you drove on the lot, there would be Peter Lawford with his surfboard in the back of his Cadillac. Mickey Rooney would be telling jokes, and Fred Astaire would be kind of gliding up to have lunch. He never walked. He just would glide, and he always wore like a rope instead of a belt, and he always had his towel around his neck, and then he'd be Gene Kelly, and then you'd see, Katharine Hepburn kind of ducking behind hedges so nobody bothered her. And there was just all the greatest stars. Judy Garland had just left prior to my coming, and of course I adored her. She was one of my favorites. And well, we had so many greats: Katharine Hepburn, Ann Miller, and just because the list was on and on and on. And then the second cast, Lee J. Cobb and Agnes Moorehead, all the second actors, in line. James Whitmore, Nancy Davis, Mrs. Ronald Reagan was under contract when I was. So they were exciting times, fun times. It was like a big college.
That's what Ann Miller said. She said it was like my university, my alma mater.
What it was, we didn't go to school. That was our school. And the nice thing is that we all really liked each other. There was no, honestly, on anyone that I can think of, there was no jealousy and, upset that somebody else got the part, because they did that, they just put us in a movie and another movie. When Judy got sick, Janie Powell went into
Royal Wedding.
A Royal Wedding, and we were all very sad that when Judy left, because Mario Lanza they fired because he was getting too heavy. Isn't that stupid? That is stupid. But that's how it was. You had to really stay in shape. We were in exercise class at 8 in the morning, and we danced all day. We had to look great. My waist was 17 inches, 18 inches, Janie's probably was 16. She's shorter, smaller. Sure. Anne Blythe was unreal. She looks like Dorian Gray to this day. She's so gorgeous, you just want to smack her. And Sid Charisse is so beautiful, you just go, stop it. How long can one maintain like this? So I have to keep up with the girls. You're wearing me out, these broads, they're just too good looking and thin. I can't eat, I can't do anything, because, as soon as they walk in, they'll say, oh, getting a stomach, huh? Better do sit-ups, Debbie. All right. Every time Marge Champion sees me, need some work there. Shut up and leave me alone, Marge,
She was very close to you, she and Gower.
Marge and Gower, we were very good friends, and they had 2 boys, and I had Carrie and Todd. So I always took their boys to church, because Gower wasn't particularly interested in all that, He went a couple of times, and he kind of liked it, actually. He didn't want to admit that. But he did like the children going, and I'd pick up the kids, because they were touring more in those days. They did their act. It was great. Gower and Marge were great together. So I really grew up in the business in every form of it. And then when all the movies changed, it really ended for me in 1970, I think it was. I produced a picture called What's the Matter with Helen with Shelley Winters. I actually produced it, put up my own money and everything. And then my husband lost all the money, and he became this cuckoo bird, and I had to leave him because we were all going down the drain. So I had to keep his kids in school, my kids. I had 5 children, so I couldn't produce any more movies. Otherwise, I would be making musicals, and I would be making very clean comedies, because I think we've really gone over the edge. I'm embarrassed by a lot of the product for our young people to see. I don't think they have really the kind of examples that they need. I just think it's not the kind of image I would like my children to say, oh, I want to be like her. I'm not in agreement with it.
Another movie I want to talk about is How the West Was Won, which you did for director Henry Hathaway. And you appear with the likes of James Stewart, Thelma Ritter, and of course your dear friend Agnes Moorehead. Now you did a lot of your own stunts in that film, didn't you?
Yes, How the West Was Won required you to ride horses, and the covered wagon was always going down cliffs. And of course, Henry Hathaway, the director, would just say, oh, we don't need a double, you could do it. And nothing's going to happen. We have frogmen in the water, it'll be perfectly fine. So of course, the wagon goes over, and we're caught in the rapids in the Gunnison River in Colorado, and we just got smashed against the rocks. We're miles down the river. We're drowning. Thelma Ritter is cussing a blue streak. You've never heard. She is cursing out Hathaway, who's yelling, keep going, it's great, you know. And the frogmen are now, they can't reach us. We've already passed them. We're way down, you know. 2 men drowned on that pool that were in that film, that were stuntmen. Well, they finally caught us, you know, held me upside down, the water flies. Well, I couldn't work the rest of the day. Thelma, nor I, we had just turned purple, so, and we just cussed out Henry Hathaway forever. He was a great character, but he wanted you to do it. They had a scene, a wild horse thing, and the horses, you know, it was a stampede. So I'm supposed to fall off the wagon, and they're supposed to have a double. So Henry told the wrangler guy that's in charge of the horses and everything that just to tip the wagon while I'm there, and no, it'll throw me out, and he'll get the shot. He won't need the double. So that's what happened. So I'm trying to handle 6 horses is impossible. You know, how can you control 6 wild horses? They're great. I mean, they're you know, caught up in the drama. Everybody's with them. So we're charging down to the Texas Divide, which goes 400,000 sheer feet off a cliff. You know, and Thelma Ritter's hanging on the side, going, "Oh, son of a fuck!" Every word. I'm gonna stop. And I said, "Oh, shut up, Thelma. It'll be fine." You know, everything. And then they just tipped the wagon. She held on. I fell out in front of horses that are stampeding at me. I'm rolling out, the hoofs are coming at me. Henry's so happy. You can just, he's smiling, you know, it's great, you know, because I know I'm dying of hoof in the thing. Any minute I will never, hoof in the head, hoof in the boobs, hoof of my baby. So I made it somehow, because they finally said cut. You know, and I was rolling, just rolling, trying to stay out of the, but he didn't need a double.
Did you do your stunts after that in any other film? I guess you could after you did it with that. I always did. Well, I lived through the hoof. What the heck? I liked, after that, I was so proud of myself that I lived. When I did The Singing Nun, I had to ride a scooter. I'd never, ever been on a scooter or a motorbike. I'm not Anne Margaret, or Cher. I honestly don't want the breeze in my hair. So I just don't care about motorcycles very much. And I had to drive this scooter as the nun, you see, in the full drag habit. You know, with my cross and my chain and my everything. And then I was supposed to fall into some sort of little pit on the side, which I did. I learned how to do it with a boy who was terrific, and he brought the scooter over to my house. I fell off every second, and I crashed it 100 times. But finally, in the film, I did do that trick where the scooter falls and the nun, which is me, falls into the pit. And I didn't get hurt, but I was really scared of that one. I didn't like that. I don't like horses either, you know, because they look at me with the eye. I'll get you. Going back to Gower Champion, he brought you to Broadway when you made your debut, which was another trial by fire in the wonderful musical Irene.
I brought Gower to Irene.
You brought him into it, right? Because was it Sir John Gielgud was your original director?
We were out of town working with Sir John Gielgud as the director and Hugh Wheeler as the writer, and Peter Gennaro as choreographer for Irene. And it just was not coming together, script-wise, story-wise, blending it, meshing it. And so the producers got together and they didn't know what to do, and I called Gower in Los Angeles, who's on the beach with a young girl named Debbie, and it's in the sun, and we're in Philadelphia in the rain. I said, Gower, you have to come and rescue me, because this was after my husband had lost all the money. I was in such trouble. He said, Debbie, I don't want to come to Philadelphia in the rain. I just did, you know, he just did that wonderful No, No, Nanette, you know, big hits. He didn't need this. Well, he came because he was my good friend, and it was 4 months later. He's still with me, and 14 finales later, and 6 openings later. And I thought it was a wonderful play. I thought Irene was a wonderful musical comedy, and Peter Gennaro stayed, Gower directed, and they worked great together. And I will never forget him for that, because he really saved my personal life, my children's education. I hadn't a penny when I started that play. So I was very grateful. I still am very grateful to Gower for that, forever.
It's one of my favorite Broadway musicals.
Yes.
What did you enjoy the most? Was it Patsy Kelly?
Well, once we got on Broadway, I would say I enjoyed Patsy Kelly and the whole cast, because they were like my kids by then. All the dancers were brilliant, triple flips, and I was doing rollovers, and we were really dancing great in those days. I mean, I had 16 boys tossing me in the air, and I'd say the fun of it was just being with all of them and hanging out afterwards. And they'd come to my, I had a townhouse, and my children were there, Carrie and Todd, and my hairdresser stayed there, and George Firth, and a friend of mine, the writer, and we all just partied. So we had a wonderful time. It was a great experience here in New York, and it was one of my best times. One of my worst times and one of my best times, as far as a marriage dissolving and being broke and having to pay all my husband's debts, etc. And then Irene just saved my life.
Isn't it great when you're a performer that you can use your talent to turn your life around?
Well, God is good,
Yeah.
There is a destiny, but you have to have the courage to continue on, because you get very down. And if you give up, then of course nothing will happen. If you have courage within yourself, you believe in yourself, and you work very, very hard. Just work till it's impossible to walk anymore. You can make it. You just must never give up. You must always believe in yourself and in your faith that there is someone looking after us that gave us that talent, and we just have to keep moving forward in that direction.
I never dreamt I'd be in show business. No one in my family's in show business. I love show business. It's so much fun. I'm never going to retire. I'm going to be like George Burns. I'm just going to stay here till I drop dead. Then I'm going to have myself stuffed like Trigger. Hey. Because I know my dad, see, I was born in Texas, and we were really poor. Were you ever poor? Still are? That's a good seat. You can't be poor. And we lived with my grandmama and grandpa. I don't know if you remember those days, but y'all lived together, I had all these uncles, because in those days, it's before the pills. So, my grandma just kept having those things. They just fell out. I don't know what they were. I had 5 uncles, and so we all slept together. My uncles, I had 5 uncles down there. We slept in one big old bed, 5 uncles and my brother and myself right up here. Yeah, I never slept alone until I got married.
Now, an added surprise tonight, you had Carlton Carpenter.
I know.
Tell me what that was like, doing the number again with him on stage.
Fun. Well, he's so cute, and he just had his birthday yesterday. I better not say his age, because he'll be mad at me. I couldn't believe he really told the truth. And he's just gotten over a double hip operation and all that. Carlton's 6'4", so to handle those hips, that would be something. Well, he got up on the stage and he sang the song. I think it's a special moment when it's been 50 years ago that we did Abba Dabba Dabba. So I think the audience enjoyed that.
All night long they chatter away, all day long they were happy and gay, swinging and singing in the honky-tonky way.
He forgot the lyrics. I'm in love with you.
I think Hollywood's neglected its history. And you've been you have one of the largest collections of movie memorabilia.
Yes.
And I know you're talking about a new museum. Where did it all begin for you? Where do you attribute your love for the history of Hollywood?
Well, first of all, I feel I grew up in the industry, not as far back as Mickey Rooney or Donald O'Connor when they were 3 months old, but I was just 16. And I love the business. I'm so glad that somehow my destiny, God arranged that I just fell into show business, because it's really nothing. It's hard work, but it's never a dull moment. It's very exciting. I'm 68 now, and to have this wonderful, exciting life, it's a lot of work, and you have to stay in shape, and there's not a minute rest really. When you're on, you're on. There's not an off time kind of, unless you just really stay home. You're on all the time, which is the only hard thing to handle. But my audience has always been so wonderful, because we grew up together, and they allow me to grow rather much like a European personality, a star. In Europe, you can get older and they never leave your side. You know, or country western, you can get older and they stay with you. And that's the way it's been with me. My fans have stuck with me all these years. And as far as the museum, when I was, let's see, it's 1970, MGM had the first auction. It was very sad because I was watching all of this memorabilia being sold for nothing and thrown away, and the film was being burned, and the arrangements were being thrown on the freeway and buried under sand, dirt. Nobody cared. They were just into liquidation and real estate. They didn't care anything about the history of MGM. Well, that's just broke my heart, so I went and borrowed money, and I went every day for 3 weeks. And I bought everything like in groups, you know, and How the West is Won. I bought all the casts, costumes, and the furniture for all the different movies, Bridge on the River Kwai, and it goes all, Grace Kelly and The Swan and Showboat, and it just goes on, and all the stars, you know. And I knew Grace Kelly, who was so beautiful, was going to be something more than at that time that she was. She was just studying French more to marry Prince Rainier. And then I knew Monroe was Monroe, you know, and Streisand was Streisand, even not quite then. But when she started, you know, I bought Hello Dolly, because next was Fox. And I went to Columbia and they pre-sold, and Fox pre-sold to me. So I just kept saving. And no, there is no love of the memorabilia for Hollywood. Hollywood is a sign. And production now, there are no big studios, they're all independent producers. And the stars mostly are really in charge of their own films, and if you produce your own film, then that's a hit. But there are no studios to culture you, you know, to create for you and allow you to grow, as they did me with Abba Dabba, Singing in the Rain. You know, they made me a star. I mean, they created Debbie Reynolds as June Allison, as Janie Powell, as Ann Miller, as Esther Williams, as Greta Garbo, as Katharine Hepburn, as, I mean, how long is the list, you know, and Betty Grable, I mean, it goes on and on. So I was very fortunate to be in that wonderful era, and I want to save that history, and I'm doing that. It is a big job, and I know they're out there, and I wish that every person that's out there as a star especially would help me, would volunteer, would call me, and just assist the preservation.
Out of all the roles that you created on film, this is the last question, which is the one that's closest to Mary Frances Reynolds?
Oh, I think the Unsinkable Molly Brown is who I am, as far as wanting life and having life and never giving up on life.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for sitting here tonight with me. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you and to be here in this beautiful theater. This is a very special theater.
Come back to the paper mill again.
It's a nice paper mill, isn't it?
Great.